CBC's truth bomb shattered Carney's agenda. His plan just fell apart. When CBC unexpectedly aired a segment that exposed cracks in Prime Minister Mark Carney's leadership, it sent shockwaves through Canada's political landscape. This wasn't just an ordinary news piece. It was a pivotal moment that peeled back the polished image Carney had carefully cultivated since winning the Liberal leadership and calling the snap federal election on April 28, 2025. The segment revealed a stark contrast between Carney's promises and the realities of his government's actions, shaking public confidence and giving new momentum to conservative critics determined to hold the Liberals accountable. Carney entered office with a promise to bring stability, confidence, and unity to a country weary of political turmoil. His campaign emphasized pragmatism, delaying contentious projects, tempering divisive policies like the carbon tax, and presenting himself as a thoughtful, measured leader. However, these calculated moves often came across as hesitant and lacking conviction. The CBC broadcast exposed this hesitancy in vivid detail, showcasing moments where Carney struggled to justify why his government's tax relief was so minimal and why infrastructure projects remained stalled, issues deeply affecting the lives of everyday Canadians striving to make ends meet. The tax relief promised by Carney, often described as an $800 cut for Canadian families, was subjected to intense scrutiny. Independent assessments revealed that the average household would only see about $90 of relief, a fraction of what was promised. This revelation dealt a serious blow to the Liberal narrative, which painted this tax cut as meaningful economic assistance to struggling Canadians. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre seized on these facts, holding press conferences and releasing videos that underscored the vast gap between Liberal rhetoric and reality, portraying the government as out of touch and ineffective. Poilievre also focused attention on Bill C5, a piece of legislation originally crafted to expand government powers with little oversight. Critics feared the bill would enable ministers to sidestep crucial accountability mechanisms and concentrate too much power in the executive branch. The Conservative Party pushed back strongly, demanding amendments to restore protections under key acts like the Access to Information Act and the Conflict of Interest Act. Their efforts resulted in significant changes to the bill, ensuring better transparency and democratic safeguards. Despite CBC's attempts to frame this as mere partisan politics, the reality was that the Conservatives had protected democratic institutions from overreach. Energy and infrastructure have become another hot-button issue, defining this political battle. Western provincial premiers, particularly from Alberta and Saskatchewan, have banded together in support of pipelines and resource development, portraying these projects as vital to Canada's economic future and national strength. They argue these efforts are nation-building and critical to job creation in resource-dependent regions. Meanwhile, Carney's federal government has maintained a firm stance against many such projects, citing environmental concerns and climate commitments. This position frustrates many Canadians who see it as ideological rigidity that hampers economic growth and regional development. Adding to the frustration is the apparent hypocrisy regarding energy imports. While domestic oil production faces increasing restrictions, Canada continues to import oil from countries with far weaker environmental standards, such as Saudi Arabia. This contradiction raises serious questions about the government's priorities and fuels skepticism about whether environmental goals are genuine or just political cover for other interests. Carney's vision of a one Canadian economy that would shield the country from international economic shocks has also been called into question. While the government claims that strengthening domestic trade links will create resilience, the Canadian economy remains deeply intertwined with global markets. The reality is that external forces, including fluctuating commodity prices and global supply chain issues, continue to exert significant influence. Moreover, efforts to diversify trade have struggled to gain traction, and Canadian pension funds increasingly invest abroad, signaling a lack of confidence in the domestic market's prospects. At the same time, the government's ambitious social programs and environmental mandates often seem disconnected from these economic realities. Policies like the zero-emission vehicle mandate and strict fuel standards have increased costs for consumers and limited their choices, leading to growing public frustration. Pierre Poilievre has positioned himself as a champion of market freedom and individual rights, pledging to repeal or reform such measures to ease the burden on Canadians and restore economic freedom. The contrast between federal policies and provincial initiatives is stark. Provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan are pushing ahead with pragmatic strategies focused on resource development and infrastructure investment, demonstrating that economic growth and environmental stewardship can coexist. However, Ottawa's continued regulatory gridlock and ideological inflexibility frustrate many, highlighting regional tensions and a widening divide between local and federal priorities. Carney's personal financial interests have also come under scrutiny. Reports highlight his past leadership role in a renewable energy firm whose stock value has declined over recent years. Critics question whether his climate policies might be influenced by personal investments, raising concerns about transparency and potential conflicts of interest. These suspicions further erode public trust and amplify doubts about the sincerity of the government's environmental commitments. Voices like Jasmine Lane and other critics argue passionately that Canada's current path is unsustainable. They say the country cannot afford to reject revenue-generating projects while expanding costly social programs without the necessary economic foundation. Real progress, they insist, depends on empowering citizens, respecting provincial autonomy, and supporting concrete nation-building projects that promote prosperity and unity. The CBC truth bomb was more than a fleeting media moment. It crystallized the growing disconnect between political promises and policy outcomes. Carney's attempt to balance progressive ideals with economic pragmatism has, so far, failed to convince large segments of the Canadian public. As conservatives continue to expose these contradictions, the country faces a defining choice about its future direction. Moving forward, Carney's government must decide whether to double down on cautious, incremental reforms or embrace bold, transformative policies that bridge ideological divides. The recent election gave the Liberals a renewed mandate, but sustaining public support will require delivering real results that resonate with everyday Canadians. Whether Carney can pivot to meet these demands remains uncertain, but the CBC's revelation has already reshaped the political conversation and set the stage for intense battles ahead.